Different message from leaders in the oil and gas industry to Capitol Hill. Hi, I'm Chris Casteel in the Washington Bureau of the Oklahoman. I'm here with Mike Cantrell of ADA. He's in Washington this week. Mike is president of the Domestic Energy Producers Alliance, which, along with many groups in Washington and around the country, talks about oil and gas issues. You're an long-time oil and gas man yourself, and been involved in numerous issues. And of course, you've got all kinds of trade groups here and around the country involved in energy issues, which are really important on Capitol Hill right now. Tell me what's different about your group and why you
well,
formed
Chris,
it.
we appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I watch these myself. And so, I mean, it's going to be fun to watch me on. Mainly the reason we formed the Domestic Energy Producers Alliance about a little over a year ago now, is that we, and when I say we, I'll tell you who we are.
Okay.
The Domestic Energy Producers Alliance is a collaboration, is the best way to look at it, between Oklahoma Independent Petroleum Association, the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, the Kansas Independent Oil and Gas Association, the National Association of Royalty Owners, and the National Stripper Well Association.
Okay.
Those five entities set on what we would look at as an executive governing group where we work out of consensus. We don't do anything without consensus with those five groups.
Okay.
And so a year ago we were concerned, year and a half ago, we were concerned about a couple of issues. One was we were concerned about the Trans-Canadian Pipeline and its effect on the crude oil markets that we all have to have in the intercontinental United States with bringing a lot of oil into our market without taking it to Houston. They've now announced that they're going to build the line to Houston first, which we have no issue with that.
Okay.
We're going to need that oil eventually. I understand there are a lot of other issues around that, but as far as we're concerned, we have no other issue with that. The second issue that we were concerned about was seeing the Congress being controlled, the leadership of Congress and the administration, by Democrats. And basically both the leadership in Congress and the administration were in favor of issues that were to our detriment, we felt like. So the challenge becomes the president right out the chute and announced elimination of the tax preferences that oil and gas have had since the 1930s, which would take about a third of our investment capital out of the business to lose those.
This is about $80 billion worth over 10 years. It includes things like depletion allowance, intangible drilling costs, which is a way for oil companies to write down their risk, I guess.
Right.
Also the manufacturing
tax
deduction,
credit.
tax credit.
Right.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And passive loss exemption, which we all need because we need people to invest with us to drill wells. And so we were concerned about that, about the ability of traditional trade associations in our industry on a national level to work with Democrats because they've never done it. And so we began.
Haven't had to so much since early 90s.
That's
I guess.
correct.
Yeah.
And while we're Republicans, I mean, most of us that are in this group are really affiliated as Republicans. We're also pragmatic, and we felt like that the industry needed to reach out to moderate Democrats, mainly in the United States Senate, because the numbers in the House are so far to the left that we don't have much of a chance to impact policy there, although we've made some inroads into the House. Mainly working with moderate Democratic senators from oil and gas producing states, 11 of them through the last year, building relationships with them. And we think we're going to have some input into what policy comes out, and we think that's a proper thing to do.
Let me ask you this. You wrote an interesting op-ed recently where you talked about the impact the BP spill could have on the industry and your issues. I mean, when you have an incident like that, and you can just see the fallout from it, does it make it harder for you to go into a community and try to convince them, look, we've been doing this for years, we know what we're doing, it's safe?
Fear translates. Fear moves, and fear in the Gulf and fear on land, when they're two separate issues completely. One has nothing to do with the other, but they transfer. They transfer. The fear transfers into something that's unknown, like hydraulic fracturing. And we knew immediately when the BP spill happened that we were going to have real serious policy issues because of that. Even though we're on land producers, that none of us work in the deep water, we knew that it would transfer onto issues that affect us. And so, our industry's first inclination is to differentiate between ourselves and them. We don't do that. You shouldn't look at it that way. And then I think we also need to be thoughtful. that if there's fear, and we should address it. Even if it's unfounded, we should address it and be willing to talk about it and be transparent.
Right.
And so that's what our group's trying to do, is offer transparency and dialogue and hopefully find solutions.
Let me ask you this. You were involved in a really interesting fight up here about, I think about 10 years ago, in relation to whether some countries were dumping oil onto the marketplace, and that wound up involving a lot of the multinational oil energy companies. A really interesting fight that you lost, but it was fascinating for a while. And now I think, are you up here again trying to kind of make a distinction between independents and big companies? And on this tax stuff, I mean, how do you make that distinction? I think some, aren't the ITCs, aren't those only for independents?
The major integrated companies get 70% of the tangible drilling costs. I think they'll probably lose those in one of the pay-fors that they're going to have to do to pay for the things they want to do.
Right.
So we're advocating that independents drill 90% plus of the wells in America, and we invest huge amounts of capital into drilling. In fact, we even spend all of our capital in drilling new wells, and then we borrow money to drill more.
Right.
Probably not the smartest business model, but that's what we do. And so we think it's a good investment for the American public that independents, at least, ought to be able to keep those tax provisions in order to help supply capital. We would lose a third of our capital if the president got his way and we lost all of those provisions.
Mike, thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Chris. It's been good to be here.
And look for more on this in the Oklahoman and on newsok.com.